The organization that I went to was Narcotics Anonymous for both visits, but at different locations in the south suburbs. Um, uh, Narcotics Anonymous was set up as a group therapy setting. The first one was at the South Suburban Orlando Club, which is at 2029 Hillview Drive, Chicago Heights, in Chicago, as and the website for it is A N.A.org, which is the national website for meetings. The meetings can be with healthcare professionals, one or with community helpers. Community helpers are trained professionals that conduct the meetings just like a professional would. They also go by guidelines that are written by the organization itself, and use books in the meeting that members read along. They also You can also buy the books at the meetings. Since the Congress is a worldwide, there are meetings in every city in the world. Since it covers a lot of different drugs, people come for a variety of reasons. It also helps as many of these meetings are held at night and sometimes held in churches. The first meeting was actually a building owned by Narcotics Anonymous. The meeting was sponsored by the people who go. Since the building was owned by Narcotics Anonymous, and they had members raise the funds to pay for the rent there. They also had a collection for any of the refreshments. One of the main things that's at Narcotics Anonymous is coffee, but also at the second meeting, which was at St. Jude Church in South Holland, it had a large smorgasbord of refreshments, including coffee, which that day was very watered down. The first meeting was an open one, while the second was a closed one. The difference between an open one is for everyone, so anybody, as long as they are not law enforcement, can come in, since it is anonymous, and come in and sit with people. That's usually a time when families come to listen to family members' testimony. A closed one, which I went to the second time at St. Jude's Church in South Holland, was for only people who had drug addiction, and that is closed just for people who are in recovery. The Narcotics Anonymous is run by a board, and that board, on top of other boards, vote on what is for the whole organization. Now, the international organization has its own board, and the United States one has its own. Both are located in California, which is funny because the original meeting started in California. How it works is, the routine is, the meetings are run by the top voted, or the boards are run by the members who are voted in. Then there are regional and state boards that regulate the meetings, and the chairman who actually runs the meetings. The chairman is basically the group leader, and it's usually someone who is in recovery for many years and has decided to either chair one because they've been at the meeting for so many years, or they decide to start one. The first meeting had a community leader who was somebody who was taught by Narcotics Anonymous and went by the guidelines. The second one had 3 chairmen, who one of them was actually a professional who worked at a drug rehab center. Funny enough, both run by a person named Greg. The meetings, the routine has it where the meetings, the chairman or leaders of the group stay up to date, so that meetings are so up to date with the regional person the regional chairman who they have meetings with individually outside of Narcotics Anonymous meeting, and then they go and they keep them on the dictionary. The first meeting, when they had announcements, which is something that they do at all meetings, to announce when the next meeting is and what other meetings are happening in the area, including social events where you can, one thing, be social around addicts and not have the fear of drugs and alcohol, but also for testimony. The first meeting had it where they were explaining that they had to go to the chairman had to go to a meeting to keep them on the registry. The registry is actually on the website, on the Narcotics website, which anonymous.org registry. And for them to keep on there, they have to go to regional meetings and get updated and explain, basically like any group meeting. A great example would be at Chicago State. They have group meetings where group leaders go and they show the minutes of what's been going on in their group, which they have a secretary for, which was basically, since there was only one chairman for the first meeting, that was all of what he was doing, was the chairman. Although he did not do the announcement, there was another person who did the announcement. But that was a chairman from another group who came to do some of the announcements. How it works is representatives of which participate in area service committees. Then there's the several area service committees from the regional service committee. The regional delegates make up the A.N.A. World Service Committee. But the bottom is the chairman, or would say members, and at the very end is the members who vote all these people in. So it's a organization made for addicts by addicts. During that time, the organization, which was started at an AA meeting. During that time, AA meetings would only allow alcoholics to come, and only in open meetings were other addicts allowed to come. And during one of the meetings, people decided, which was Bill Wilson decided that there needed to be a meeting that was specifically in the for other people who were struggling. So in 1948, Bill Wilson started Narcotics Anonymous in New York prison system. It would not be until 1953 in Lawrence County the first official meeting started. Then in 1953, Jimmy Kinnon, along with most from the AA, debated, and along with most from AA, debated and established bylaws of the organization. It would not be until September 14, 1953, that AA was officially recognized by, A.N.A. was officially recognized by AA. In 1954, the first publication, the Yellow Little Book, was published. It was the first draft of the 12 steps that the organizations use today, and it is still being revisioned. They recently tried to make sure that they could not be used in a political sense or in a religion. Even though they do speak about being spiritual, they have no particular religion or political agenda. It was stated, "We are not connected with any political, religious, or law enforcement groups." At the time, regular meetings were not being held on a regular basis. So 4 addicts by the name of Jimmy, Sylvia W., Scott C., and Peggy K., they just dedicated themselves to meetings to take part on a regular basis, in the hopes that at least one addict would be helpful, and if they made a meeting. They they continued that for 2 years. And in 1960, there was only one meeting in the world. In the coming years, meetings started all over the country and all over the world. And by 2007, there are over 25,065 groups hold over 43,900 weekly meetings in 127 countries. When you look at the population that they serve, it breaks down to this: 57% are male, while 42% are female, and 1% are other. The ages are 1% under 21, 14% 21 to 30%, 25% 31 to 40, and 20% 41 to 50, while 25% is 50 to 60, and 15% are over 60. There are 70% Caucasian, 13% African American, and 7% Hispanic, 4% multiracial, and 6% other. The employment rates are 64% employed full-time, 11% employed part-time, and 11% retired, and 7% unemployed. So if you think about it from a very real perspective, many addicts, when they come into meetings, are unemployed. By the time they get through the process of the 12 steps, they're employed, which is basically in a good direction from being many times homeless and not being able to work because of their addiction to be working full-time is an achievement. The funding for individual chapters and meetings at each meeting, similar to the church collection, comes around. The first chapter I went to, they had to pay for the space since it was owned by Narcotics Anonymous, and they just had to pay for rent. But they also had to pay for refreshments, which was a little spread and coffee, which was pretty good. The second one was at a church, St. Victor's Church, and South Holland, and they didn't necessarily have to pay for rent, but they did have to pay for refreshments. But they did have a collection just for the meeting, and that collection could be. They didn't mention rent, but they could have to pay for rent, or they could for organizing social time. They are staffed by a chairman who is trained to hold the meetings like a group therapy and to go by the book or guidelines of A.N.A. The first meeting was by a chairman, and the second one was by 3 chairmen, and one was a healthcare professional who worked at a rehab. All chairmen are sober addicts who have been there for many years, many times. Some talking about 30 years sober. What they do for the public is that they have resources for people to look up, and especially for professionals, they have a whole section about what A.N.A. is about, where you can find meetings, how the treatment is. Basically, so healthcare professionals, if they never went to a meeting before, they can walk a client through and make sure that they one thing they understand, and then they can walk through the process for their clients. And one thing I would say that would be better would, because for me, when I went to the meetings, it was a very uplifting experience, similar to going to church. So it was a really great experience. But it was also very scary because it was the first time me going to these kinds of meetings, and I felt very uncomfortable. But once you go there, you understand it's not like the scary, creepy version in the movies, and it's very helpful. I would change the fact that they would have at least in my area, they have a lot more open meetings, and they should invite more healthcare professionals, because one thing, then it's something that will help healthcare professionals be better at their jobs. And another thing is that especially for me, I did not ever go to one before, and it's a learning experience. And I think understanding that people who are not in the healthcare profession do group therapy, and seeing a little bit, because you can always, I would say a good way to, would be a great internship where you're helping people on a regular basis and having meetings. So thank you. My name is Jacqueline Brown, and this is my presentation on our on our counselors.